to say hello. Thank you for being here this evening at this meeting. We appreciate everyone. I'm State Representative Paul Sherrill in the 43rd District. I have all of White County and about 2/3 of Warren and all of Grundy. And I have talked to different people that has come in here out front. I know we have people here from all over the great state of Tennessee, and we appreciate you being here. We do want to welcome TWRA here this evening to be a part of this meeting. And before we get started in the meeting, I think it would be proper order, as we call this meeting to order, to do an invitation. We'll just have a prayer. And if you would, men, would you remove your hats? And we're going to ask Dr. Womack if he would lead us in prayer.
Could you bow your heads, please? Dear God, thank you for bringing us here tonight in the spirit of American democracy to express our opinions and come together to do what's right. In thy name, amen.
Amen. Would you lead us in pledge of allegiance? Oh, this young man here. If you would continue standing.
If you would, please stand with me and let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Again, thank you very much. The reason that we are here this evening, and we do always want to say thank you to each and every one that is here. I was contacted back the early part of August about what is taking place, or what TWRA is wanting to do up at the ranch about the cutting of the timber. So I went to a meeting in Cookeville August the 19th and met with our commissioners that are here. We have several of our commissioners with TWRA with us tonight, and we appreciate all of the commissioners and each and every one that's here representing TWRA tonight. So as I went to the meeting and concerned with the people that asked me to go to Cookeville and talk to the commissioners about the situation, and I told them what I had been told, and I don't have all the information, but I'm telling you what I was told at this meeting, that and tried to explain to the people that's here today that we was told that TWRA, which has the farm up there that Bridgestone, Firestone owned at one time, and they give this property to the state of Tennessee, and now it's in the hands of TWRA. So they have 800 acres probably that's already clear-cutted up there that they do this managing of hunting on it already. So now they are wanting to, and I'm going on what I was told, okay? So I'm here to learn just like each and every one of us. They are wanting to come now and cut a lot of other hardwood timber that is up there on that mountain, and maybe it sounds like down into the Scotts Gulf. Well, if that's true, the people has contacted me along with Senator Bailey and others, and they don't want this to happen. So we're here tonight. We've asked TWRA to come to this community meeting, and we want to try to see if we can answer some questions to the people why this is possibly taking place. And we want to see if you have a question, we're going to try to do it in an orderly way. We're going to try to give you 3 minutes to ask a question at some point in time. But first of all, we're going to start out, and Paul Bailey, Senator Paul Bailey, will elaborate just a little bit, and then we're going to turn this over to TWRA, and then we'll have others to elaborate and ask questions. So again, thank you, and Senator Paul Bailey.
Well, thank you guys for being here this afternoon. I'd like to welcome my colleague from Nashville. She's a state senator in the Nashville area, Senator Campbell. She drove all the way up to be with us today. So welcome, Senator Campbell, to the 15th Senate District in White County. Just as Representative Sherrill has mentioned, I have heard from many of you for the past several weeks in regards to the Bridgestone Firestone. And certainly it is an issue that the people needed to hear from TWRA as to their plans moving forward with what they're planning on doing in creating various habitats there at TWRA. As I've spoken with them and with Representative Sherrill, this is definitely an informational meeting. They want to share with you and share with the community exactly what their plans are moving forward. They're also going to allow you to ask questions of them as they make their presentation, and then I think we also have some others that have a short presentation as well. So again, welcome. Glad that you're here, and with that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Director Wilson of the TWRA.
Thank you, Representative Sherrill and Senator Bailey. And I want to thank everybody for being here. Obviously, you wouldn't be here if you weren't concerned about it and heard some things. We hope to straighten out a lot of the maybe misconceptions or maybe answer some questions that you have tonight. As Representative Sherrill said, we have 7 commissioners here, and our commissioners are a volunteer board. They're not paid anything, and they come here at their own. They came here at their own time, and they're interested too, and they're concerned. So they want to hear what everybody has to say. So we're here to listen. We're here to listen to your questions and try to answer them. And we're here to make a presentation so you'll have a better understanding of what what we'd like to try to do. So please have an open mind going forward. And what we're presenting tonight is what we would like to try to do to the Bridgestone Firestone Wilderness area. So with that, I want to introduce Mimi Barnes. Mimi is going to be our facilitator tonight. She is the communications and outreach coordinator for this area. We call it Region 3. And so Mimi's going to handle introducing our guest speakers tonight. So, Mimi.
Good evening. I'd also like to say thank you for being here. One thing I know we all have in common is care. And for someone who's worked for wildlife and public service for 29 years, I relate to that care, so I appreciate your time out of your busy schedules. I'm going to introduce all 4 speakers this evening. Wally Akins is our Assistant Chief of Wildlife and Forestry Division with the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. Dr. Craig Harper is with the UT Extension and just an expert in the field, and we always appreciate his knowledge. Dr. Dwayne Estes is the Executive Director of the Southeastern Grasslands Initiative, and Mike Butler is the Chief Executive Officer of the Tennessee Wildlife Foundation. We do have some ground rules that we would like to share with all of you, and that is to be respectful of time. We will have question and answers. We'll limit that to 3 minutes, and that will take place after these 4 presentations. Representative Sherrill has asked for a few folks to speak, and then we'll do question and answer. So we appreciate your patience, and again, thank you for being here. With that, I'll turn it over to Wally for the first presentation.
Thank you, Mimi and Senator Bailey and Representative Sherrill, for allowing us to be here tonight. We truly appreciate the opportunity to come. And, you know, it's evident with as many as people here. I'm just glad to see that, because we know already we share a passion for our natural resources and care about our land base and what happens on it. So, you know, that is something that I truly appreciate. My name is Wally Akins, and I'm Assistant Chief of Wildlife and Forestry Division. I've been working for the agency about 25 years, a little bit over. Doesn't seem like it, but it's went by pretty fast. I'm a native of Monroe County in East Tennessee, where I grew up and moved around different parts of the state with the agency. I want to talk about the habitat restoration project we are wanting to do or proposing to do at Bridgestone, Firestone WMA. This WMA is a pretty popular area in this part of the Cumberland Plateau. It provides a lot of recreational opportunities for hunting and non-consumptive uses, hiking, bird watching, etc. We acquired this the initial piece of property, which is the lighter green color, around the turn of the century, over 20 years ago. We received this from a donation from the Bridgestone Firestone Corporation, and where we have management rights subject to a conservation easement agreement that is held by the Tennessee Wildlife Federation. Since then, We've acquired additional lands where now we're over, or right around 20,000 acres total on the WMA. About 82% of this WMA is forested. We have neighbors, existing state lands with, that are in state natural areas, state parks, or state forest, totaling around 55,000 acres. So there's a lot of public land in this area. We also have some pretty large landowners of private lands, non-industrial private landowners, as well as other non-government organizations like the Nature Conservancy. So there's a lot of space here, a lot of public land for people to utilize. Most of these lands are forested as well. We've been managing our WMA for a lot of work with prescribed fire, a lot of invasive plant removal, things like that to benefit wildlife. Now, here is a map that has been distributed out inadvertently. This map was used on a field trip as just something to go along with on the tour that day. It was not vetted with the agency through proper channels, but it is the map that has caused a lot of discussion and drawn a lot of attention, and that's why we're here tonight. Drawing you in a little closer to the northern half of Bridgestone Firestone, that light green is the conservation easement area. And that arrow, if you don't mind, keep your eye on that, because I want to walk through a series of slides here to kind of give you an idea of what we are proposing to do as an agency and as a management application. So we are proposing, here's our existing open areas of habitat. On the very north is what we call the farm area. This was, when we acquired this property, was a beef cattle operation. It was an open farmland that we've managed for early successional plant communities. And then below that, south of about the middle of the slide, that T, it also has that hashed area, is a recently cleared loblolly pine plantation. So we have two areas here of early successional plant communities. Now, this green color is the upland area as described in the conservation easement agreement. And if we get to do some work, this is where our proposal is to do the habitat restoration project. Today, this is the proposed timber harvest. It's around 230 acres, give or take. It's in the northwestern section of the upland area. And eventually, that's what we're proposing to do in the near future. Eventually, we would like to do additional habitat restoration work south of that to provide connectivity between those two habitat types. We've been in constant consultation and deliberation with the easement holders throughout this process to ensure we'll be in compliance with the easement, with all aspects of the easement agreement. We're still waiting to get final approval on this. So no timber contracts have been let out. Nothing has went forward beyond a plan to date. If we get to do this, we'll follow all the state best management practices and guidelines with the Tennessee Division of Forestry. No work will be within the rim line or 1,000 feet of the rim line, nor down the side slopes of the Caney Fork River drainage. The red line you see here is the 1,600-foot elevation mark. So inside 1,000 foot of that, we propose to do no disturbance, nor down the side slopes into the Caney Fork River drainage. All historical roads and hiking trails will remain clear and free of brush at all times during this operation. So, why do we want to do this? Now, this graph, I know you may not be able to see it from a distance back, but it's a different species of bird guilds or group of species, and showing their gradual decline really for the last 40 or 50 years. Now, the gray line is forest birds, and it shows a almost a leveling off, or instead of a downward trend, but it is leveled off. So those are birds that will inhabit interior forest lands. The wetland bird species, however, are on an upward trajectory, so that's a good thing. Now, establishing our proposal of an oak pine savanna, our intention is to provide quality habitat for a group of species that's been in continual decline for decades. So not only in Tennessee, but around the nation and the Southeast. So these causes of the decline are multifaceted, they're complex, but they're interrelated. But it boils down to a loss of quality early successional plant communities across all biomes and all species guilds. There's a wide range population trajectory that indicates a net loss of approaching 3 billion birds since 1970. That's a 29% decrease in all bird species. This loss of bird abundance signals an urgent need to address threats and to avert future avifaunal collapse and associated loss in ecosystem integrity, function, and service. In a recent 3 billion bird report, grassland and shrubland birds were the group of species that were declining the most. They've showed the largest magnitude of total population loss since 1970, which is more than 700 million breeding birds or breeding individuals across 31 different species. There's 74 of these species that are currently in decline. Now, harvesting timber does open up the forest canopy, allows sunlight to hit the floor, allows seeds to germinate and plant life to respond. Over time, this resulting plant community offers a wide range of benefits for a wide range of species, many of which are disturbance dependent, and they require these young cereal stage habitats to thrive and survive. And just some pictures of some other areas we've managed in Tennessee over the years. Why are we doing this? You know, it's really part of our mission statement to provide these habitats for a diversity of habitat types and managing and or restoring this type of habitat through proven scientific methods. We are to provide habitat for all species of wildlife, just not a few. And then in this case, what we're proposing will benefit at least 70 species of greatest conservation need in this area. You know, the landscape has changed over the years. From the time of our dads and our granddads, it's changed tremendously. Nowadays, we have large mechanized farm equipment. My granddad plowed the fields with the horse and mule. You know, large tractors, large equipment, you can farm much larger fields. Our fields and our forests are older. We are forested about 52 or 3% in the state, but our woods are a lot older than they used to be. Our field edges are grown-up fence rows that we used to have because we couldn't maintain them. We didn't have herbicides. Are now a row of mature trees that sometimes provide little habitat for a lot of wildlife. We have intensive farming practices that, as I just mentioned, with the large mechanized equipment, that's making it almost an uninhabitable environment for a lot of different wildlife species that need that grassland, shrubland type of habitat. Of course, we have residential development. We all know that especially in East Tennessee and on the plateau, we have more and more people moving to our state. But we also have a society that has a different view of what looks pretty. So most people envision of something that's pretty on their property that is mowed off, fence row to fence row, with a cleaned out fence row, all the way up to a mature hardwood forest. So, you know, the wildlife benefits are really limited in a situation like this. Just to go on, a lot of our fields are dominated by non-native exotic grasses, fescue, Bermuda, which form a dense carpet on the ground and make it impenetrable to a lot of young wildlife or a lot of small wildlife species. Bridgestone, Firestone WMA we've got a good start on these early successional plant communities, and we want to build on them. We have existing grassland and shrublands. We have an existing bird population there, quail population close by. Doing this type of management will help build these robust and diverse wildlife populations, just not for the grassland and shrubland bird species, but for deer and turkey as well. And we're also wanting to leave a considerable amount of forested acres untouched or undisturbed on this WMA. The final results are multifaceted. We support, as an agency, a science-based, proactive type of management on our lands that restores this diverse habitat and diversity of wildlife. Closed canopy forests have limited value to many wildlife species and have little ground cover vegetation, which equates to food and shelter and food and cover resources. This is about managing the amount of sunlight that reaches the ground that results in these plant communities. It allows them to respond and to enhance those food and cover resources for a number of different wildlife species. In summary, this habitat work will be closely considered, or only considered rather, in the upland area of the conservation easement that has been submitted and in review by the easement holder, which is the Tennessee Wildlife Federation. All work will be conducted within Tennessee best management practice guidelines. We will keep all trails maintained and operational during and after habitat improvements. And we expect no decline in game species. In fact, we expect this will provide year-round nutrition and cover currently not available. And the final product will be a new establishment of an endangered ecosystem. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Craig Harper.
Good evening, everybody. Wally and others asked me if I would come in and talk about considerations for wildlife with such a proposed timber harvest, and I'm happy to do that and put together a few things here that I thought might be of interest to most of you. The first thing that I'd like to highlight is the association different wildlife species have with the structure of vegetation. And when I say structure of vegetation, I'm talking about the height and density of vegetation. So if we start right here in a stand that has recently been harvested, you see the open nature of such. And so in such an area, there will be species such as these that you will find there more than any other place. And some of them won't be found in any other place. Now, of course, there are many. I'm showing you examples of each of those. But think about how the vegetation responds, and responds very quickly. And so now we're looking at a stand that was harvested 1 to 2 years ago, and we see a different assemblage of wildlife species using this stand, this young forest stand that is only 1 to 2 years old. Well, if we go forward to 3 to 5 years after harvest, these trees are growing very, very quickly from sprouts. Now, the assemblage of wildlife that is in this area is totally different from what it was just a few years ago. Now we're seeing different species that require dense structure, high stem densities for their nesting, their foraging, and cover requirements. If we go forward a few years later, when stem exclusion begins to happen through competition, trees die, and the area is opened up, and there's a lot more open space underneath, now we will see a different assemblage of species using this type of structure. Very different from what it was just a few years prior. And then, of course, as the stand continues to grow and mature, and some stands look like this with a very open structure underneath, with very little understory and mid-story development, the usual cadre of species may be found that are somewhat general, but this is an example of species that would be found in these open, closed canopied woods, as well as woods that might have a little additional structure. But then, In those woods that have additional structures such as this in the understory and the midstory, we see other species that require that type of complexity with regard to increased structure. So, with all this being said, the first thing I wanted to point out is if you are interested in having a diversity of wildlife species, then you have to have a diversity of vegetation types and successional stages in order for those species to be found. So not all species are found everywhere. There are some that are generalist, such as white-tailed deer and wild turkeys, but there are others that have absolute requirements with regard to the structure in which they are found. Now, what if we take a different approach? Instead of all the trees being cut, what if just a few of them are cut? Or maybe a few of them are killed. They're not even cut down, but they're killed maybe by girdling or hacking squirt or whatever and left standing for the dead wood that the woodpeckers and others enjoy. And if that area then is maintained such as this, for example, with relatively frequent prescribed fire, that structure remains open in the understory and the midstory does not develop. As that occurs, you will find species such as this, which we term the woodland obligates. That is the type of structure that they require. And it is also in this type of example, in this type of structure, where you will find a generalist, such as wild turkey, that actually are attracted to these areas specifically for that 2 to 3 foot structure in the understory that they select for nesting. And through our studies on turkeys in Tennessee, we find that nest success, when they nest in areas such as this, are increased versus when they place their nest in more open woods with very little understory structure, which obviously is important if you like to chase gobblers in the springtime. Now, what if we take out additional trees, such as this, and we go into what would be termed a savanna condition? Then you see the increased growth on the ground and other species that are attracted, some of which you might not think about, various bats such as the Indiana and northern long-eared bat, which are conservation priority species. They are attracted to these areas for their foraging. So the maternal roost sites where the females have their pups underneath bark, they may use these areas for that, not as often as they would in an area that had not been cut because there's fewer trees, but they still may be found here roosting, but they are attracted and actually select these areas for their foraging. These areas also provide excellent foraging conditions for white-tailed deer. And in such a situation, the amount of food that is present here versus in closed canopied stands is increased by orders of magnitude. For example, if you look here, and these are data, there it goes. These are data collected in multiple sites across Tennessee, 25 to 150 pounds, and an average is about 50 pounds of deer food in a closed canopy hardwood stand. This is not total biomass. This is just the leaves and small twig ends of those species that deer eat. So about 50 pounds per acre. Whereas in this condition right here, in more of a savanna condition, we're looking at an average of 1,000 pounds per acre. And when you consider how many more deer this can support, you're talking about at least 20 to 25 times more deer than the area that is dominated by closed canopy hardwoods. And on properties where we have managed in such a manner, we see an average increase of 20 pounds in body weight per sex and age class. So for those interested in deer hunting, such proposed activity would have great benefits with regard to the nutritional availability of white-tailed deer. The hunting would be a little different, obviously, with fewer trees, but in terms of body weights, antler sizes, per age class, there's no question that you should expect increases with such management. And of course, it is in this structure right here that we see the bobwhite. And so when we consider what is bobwhite habitat, of course, it is an area that provides the food and cover resources in a spatial arrangement that species requires. They have to have a lot of shrub cover, low, shrubby, brushy cover, such as this during the growing season. And in our research that pointer would work. Research in central Kentucky over 5 years, if you look here, of all of the factors that influence where bobwhite are found during the growing season, during the nesting season, see these are during brooding season periods, the distance to shrub cover is number one. It's the strongest influence. Now, if we go into fall, winter, again, the presence and availability of low shrub cover is the number one factor that is driving their location. And in fact, with greater than 10,000 telemetry locations, using hundreds of birds that we have captured on this area, greater than 95% of the locations all were within 40 yards of this shrubby cover, indicating how important that is. Additionally, of course, to have high quality habitat, they have to have an abundance of food plants. They need to have good distribution of the types of cover they need, and it's not just the low shrubby cover, but also this herbaceous component that is dominated by forbs, such as ragweed and beggar's lice and pokeweed and old field aster that you see right here. These are the areas that are so strongly attracted, that so strongly attract the birds during the growing season for the adults that have the broods. These are the areas that are nice and open underneath, and the chicks can follow around, pick up bugs and seeds in an open environment that they can move around. So it's not just one particular structure that fits all. And of course, the surrounding landscape is huge. As you see here in this picture, it's an early successional area with forbs and grasses and some shrub cover coming in. But look at where it is. You're talking about probably a 5-acre field that's surrounded by woods, and this is where so many people have been so frustrated over the decades in trying to manage for quail. It does not matter what you do in a particular field if you're in a forested landscape. If you're trying to manage for bobwhite, we know through research, not just that we have done, but through many states throughout the distribution of bobwhite, that you have to have an open landscape. And so this landscape effect drives restoration of bobwhite. And so trying to do this in a forested environment, you're not going to have as much success as if you're in an open environment. And so if I show you, let's climb up to about 30,000 feet and go to a few different places across the country where wild bobwhite populations are the greatest. Here is one in west central Oklahoma. There you see an icon for the Black Kettle National Grasslands. You see how open that is from the aerial view, and if we go down to the ground, here's what it looks like. This is where, if any of you are in here who are quail hunters, I guarantee you this is one of the top spots that you would want to go and quail hunt. If we go to central Kentucky, on an 8,000-acre area that is a reclaimed surface mine, so it's quite open. This is the type of structure that we see there. This is where we conducted one of the quail projects. If we go to North Florida, to tall timbers, that most people who have ever heard of a bobwhite quail are fully familiar with tall timbers, this is the type of structure that we see. And even when we go out to West Tennessee, in an open environment where there's lots of agriculture on private properties that are well managed for bobwhite, this is the type of vegetation communities that we see where quail occur at huntable numbers. So, within an open landscape, we know that bobwhite have higher survival rates, and that on-the-ground management influences not only their survival and abundance, but also their habitat use. We know that frequent disturbance, such as prescribed fire, is necessary to set back that encroachment of continued tree growth and keep that herbaceous component that bobwhite require. And then if we are interested in increasing a population, and this is really interesting right here, research has shown us that in order to increase the population at a minimum in a forested area, you need to clear or thin at least 50 acres, and that be adjacent to or very close to an open environment. So I want to close with 3 examples of results here in Tennessee. This is at Kiger Bottoms Wildlife Refuge in Blount County, next to the Smoky Mountains, not exactly what you would call, bobwhite heaven. But There, the manager thinned or cleared 96 acres on 550 acres. And he has maintained a bird per 2 acres for 15 plus years. And here you can see where trees have been thinned. Not only have bobwhite responded, but also American woodcock that are using and nesting successfully in these areas. And of course, bobwhite are found here during the fall and winter, and come spring and summer during the nesting season, they are using these areas throughout the year. If we go to West Tennessee, to Ames Plantation, in 1999, Ames reduced the component of closed canopy forest from 56% to 30% on 2,800 acres. Bobwhite winter survival increased approximately 30%, and abundance increased to approximately 1 bird per acre by the winter of 2001-2002. And then finally, if we look at Foothills Wildlife Management Area, again in East Tennessee, here a closed canopy forest, 800 acres of 6,800 acres were thinned from 2017 to 2020. And not only were conservation priority bird species increased by this management, but also if you look at the harvest rates, the harvest numbers, for 4 years prior to management, and then once management begun, during and post-management for 4 years, and compared those, the deer harvest increased by 250%, the turkey harvest increased by 445%, and the bear harvest increased by 680%. So, with regard to these efforts, is there hope related to bobwhite? With statewide restoration, in my opinion, no. The human population and associated development simply will not allow that, because there's not a space there's not typically spaces large enough to have that type of management in a suitable size and arrangement. In agricultural landscapes, yes, according to how the sites are managed, but probably this is going to be related only to government subsidized programs, which I don't know if that's very sustainable or not. On public lands, yes, but only with this focal area approach, where they have taken specific areas and deemed them as areas that are to be managed for bobwhite. Because what we know is trying to manage for everything on a particular WMA really does not work for quail. They require more specific management. So, with regard to the feasibility of this project working for bobwhite, we feel that it would have a high success rate because of the area that would be treated adjacent to an already open landscape there next to the farm unit. And now I believe Dwayne Estes has some information to provide.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Dwayne Estes. I'm a professor of biology at Austin Peay State University, Clarksville, Tennessee, executive director of the Southeastern Grasslands Initiative, and a native of Giles County, Tennessee, originally. I'd like to tell you a quick story. When I was in the 6th grade, growing up in Pulaski, Tennessee, I had a class called Tennessee History. And one of the things I remember from that class, 2 things actually. My teacher, Tommy Johns, paddled me 13 times for talking too much that particular semester. So if we're still here in about 2 hours and I'm still talking, you guys will understand why. But the one thing I do remember from Mr. Johns' class, the only academic thing I remember, was that he told the story that at the time the first Europeans came to the eastern shores of Virginia and Massachusetts, that the forests were so dense that a squirrel could travel from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River through the treetops without ever touching the ground. Raise your hand if you're like me and you grew up hearing the story of the infamous squirrel who could go that far distance. Anybody? Out of the 10,000 people we've spoken to in about 3 or 4 years, usually about 60% of our audiences have heard that squirrel. Well, what I'm here to tell you is that myth of the squirrel, especially here in Tennessee, but really throughout the southeastern United States, is exactly that. It's a myth. It's neither based in science, and nor is it based in the facts of American history. We've been greatly misled, and we've certainly been misled with respect to the ecology of Tennessee, and I hope to share just a little bit about that with you. Let me see if I can work this thing. So if this landscape could speak, what would it say? We need forensics to be able to help us go back. The reason being is this landscape has already changed over 2 centuries. There's not a person alive who can testify to what the original landscape of about 1800 or 1790 would have looked like. There's not a person whose great-great-great-grandfather or grandmother can testify and pass down stories of what the original Cumberland Plateau landscape was like. It's been changed for far too long. But if you know where to look, the little bits and pieces and vestiges of the past are all around us. Number one, even though I'm the director of the Southeastern Grasslands Initiative, let me be clear. I love hugging trees as much as anybody, and I love forest. I'll fight you over a forest. But I believe that forests, closed canopy forests, should be where closed canopy forest naturally should be. If we're talking about Savage Gulch down in the depths of the canyon, the lower slopes, I will fight you if you want to cut a 5-foot diameter cucumber magnolia. I promise you. I believe those great forests are important to cerulean warblers and forest obligate bird species and salamanders and mammals that need closed forest. But ladies and gentlemen, what's happened above the cliff line is a night and day different scenario. What's happening in the dry uplands of the Cumberland Plateau surface across almost 2 million acres of the Tennessee Plateau is a night and day difference than what happens in the gorges. So these, we know from both science and history, were not closed canopy forests. Nothing that has survived the past 200 years from those earliest days of European exploration, nothing says that these forests were closed. There is no scientific resources that you can point to from 1790s or 1810 or 1830 or anything pre-Civil War that suggests these were closed canopy conditions, not like the gorges. They're different. So we can look to history and to science to tell us the direction of where we should go. So savannas and woodlands are often not things that many people are talked about here in Tennessee. But if you were to go to Arkansas or East Texas or southern Missouri or parts of the Tall Timbers Research Center, you'd see some exquisite savannas. Do you realize we've even lost the scent of the original landscape? We've lost the smell of the pines that would have filled the air in 1820. We don't even know what that's like. So across the entire southeastern U.S., we had more than 110 million acres of savanna and open grassy woodlands. That's roughly a third of the southern landscape. Today, we've lost more than 90%, and in Tennessee, we've lost more than 99% of that ecosystem. So what happened to it? Well, most of it has grown up in trees. If you don't have bison, which disappeared by 1800, and if you don't have fire, which really ceased around 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, it grows up into trees very densely. This new book, 2012, called Forgotten Grasslands of the South, indicates that there are about 9 or 10 major types of grasslands in the southeastern U.S. Savannas are those that have scattered trees, like I just showed you. In 2016, my colleagues and I wrote a guide to the grasslands of the Mid-South to raise more awareness about these endangered ecosystems that are on their last leg. Famous Alabamian and Harvard ecologist E.O. Wilson, one of the preeminent scientists in the world, wrote, "This should be a priority goal in America's environmental movement. The southern grassland biome," which he called it, when it's properly defined to include pine savanna, is probably the richest terrestrial biome in all of North America. To understand, cherish, and preserve the great natural heritage of the southern grassland biome should be a priority goal in American environmental movement. It's not, ladies and gentlemen, hasn't been. The entire 20th century, no one knew to think about it. This is a paradigm shift that has been building, honestly, thanks to the leadership of the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, since the early 1990s, and it's still only now gaining ground. But not for long will they be the only voices. Soon there are going to be joined by a collection, and they already have been, dozens and dozens of conservation organizations are waking up to the realization that we need these endangered ecosystems back because they're part of our heritage. So in the spring of the year of next year, we partnered up with the National Geographic Society. We're going to produce the first ever map of southeastern grasslands in National Geographic magazine. This is the early start to that. And if you can see anything on here, you can tell that the Cumberland Plateau is in red. That's because it's a savanna region. Earlier this year in May, a collection of colleagues from many of the leading conservation organizations across the southeastern United States and I got together to create a new white paper published in the U.S. Geological Survey Bulletin, emphasizing the importance of these critically endangered ecosystems that so many of our wildlife species need. Yale E360 magazine covered this article, produced an article on the need to emphasize the forgotten landscapes of the South, to bring these back. I urge you to take a look. But a really revolutionary study was just completed last year. Steve Simone and Josh Kelly mapped 1.9 million acres of the Cumberland Plateau as needing to be savanna woodlands. That's a phenomenal, that's 49% of the entire Cumberland Plateau, based on science, is predicted to be savanna woodland. That's almost the entire surface of the plateau. So what are the data that support this? We can go back to the earliest land grants that your fourth great-grandfather was awarded for his service in the Revolutionary War and see that in places like Crab Orchard, they might have documented a walnut tree on one corner, but they might have documented a stake at the other corner. Why? Because there was not a tree there. Here there was a stake, here there was a red oak. Stake, 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 stake. We can take these old maps and begin to put them together. Our organization is doing it right now for 15,000 tree records from the 1779 to 1880s, early 1800s, to begin to map where these stakes were, because they tell a story that all these stakes were where there were no trees. That's from 1802. Early place names. How many of you know a glade branch or a meadow branch? I often wondered, when did they get their name? They got their name when the very first surveyors came across the Cumberland Plateau in the 1790s. They named glade branch and meadow branch. Why? Because glade and meadow are terms for open landscapes. Or we can overlay onto some of the historical quotes, like Ramsay, who was writing in 1853. Back then, Crab Orchard was a vast upland prairie covered with most luxuriant growth of native grasses, pastured over for as far as the eye could see with numerous herds of deer, elk, and buffalo. Yes, buffalo, gambling in playful security over these secluded plains. He was writing about the 1790s. Buffalo, by the time he published it, had already disappeared 50 years earlier. Now we're beginning to look and see that the biodiversity that needs our help the most are not in the upland, dry, desolate forests that are full of leaf litter and scarlet oak and sourwood trees. They're in the power line openings. Right now, we're doing a study with TVA and the Electric Power Research Institute. We're documenting 18 to 20 times more bees and almost 20 times more butterfly species in those power lines. Why? Because the power line corridors that crisscross your land are the closest thing to what the Cumberland Plateau looked like in 1780. Everything around it has been revolutionized and changed. We've lost species like the federally threatened red-cockaded woodpecker because we let our forests grow too dense. This is what Catoosa Wildlife Management Area looked like in the 1950s on the top of the plateau, this open, beautiful savanna. But today, and this picture is from the 1940s, this is what a lot of aerial view over the Cumberland Plateau looks like. It's twice as dense as it needs to be, at least. So as I conclude, this is not just about wildlife. It's not about quail. It's about the whole ecosystem, and it's about cultural history and natural history combined. These are 40 species of rare plants tracked by the Tennessee Division of Natural Areas. In the past 30 years, these savanna obligate species, half of them have disappeared completely from the Cumberland Plateau because we're not managing properly. So let's see what this looks like. On the left is Catoosa Wildlife Management Area. When researchers from the University of Tennessee and Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency went into this area and selectively thinned it, watch it carefully on the left. At first, it's almost a shock, but if you look closely, you'll see that out of the seed bank, out of the ground, emerged, it went from 30 species of wildflowers on the ground to more than 330 on the ground. Where did it come from? It didn't blow in. There's nowhere for it to blow in from. It came out of the seed bank, out of the rootstock bank. Ladies and gentlemen, we are right on the precipice of collapse of our biodiversity under our feet. In places like Fall Creek Falls State Park, Savage Gulf Natural Area, when you go into the upland plateau and you see what look like those dense forests, just know that under your feet, under the leaf litter that is 6 to 8 inch thick, smothering the ground, are hundreds of plant species who have a shelf life. We know from scientific data at these TWRA lands, they can reemerge after 50 years, 75 years. Do we want to see if they have a shelf life of 90 to 100? Because that's where we're heading. We may reach a point of no return if we want to rescue this underground biodiversity, which bats, butterflies, bees, birds, and game species all depend on. We have to have a paradigm shift. That's why our organization says we're on a course to chart a new course for conservation this century. We have to bring back fire. We have to do responsible selective thinning. And when we do, even things like rare orchids come back. Yes, I'm a flower picker, a flower lover, and a tree hugger, and a hunter, and all the above. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, for far too long in the United States, these have been the 3 big emphases of conservation: forests, wetlands, especially forested wetlands, and streams. Again, I'll fight you over forest. I love a healthy wetland, and I love clean water. It is time, well past time, that grasslands have an equal seat at the conservation table. These are the canaries in the coal mine. When we have bobwhite dropping like a rock since the 1970s, we have monarch butterflies dropping like a rock in the past couple decades, these signify that there are problems for not just these species, but hundreds of species that no one knows the name of. This is the shining example of the Cumberland Plateau we should all be desiring to emulate. This is what a healthy surface of the Cumberland Plateau looks like. With that, I appreciate your time very much. Thank you.
Thank you. We have given TWRA about an hour to discuss what they have brought to us, and now we have Marvin from the Chamber to come and to present his slides, if you would, please.
Thank you. I will say I was not prepared for this setup. I may have to walk up there to read my own slides from this far back. But let's see. And I've appreciated hearing what the TWRA would like to turn this area into, and I'm going to spend some time telling y'all what everybody in White County and the state of Tennessee was told that it was going to remain. Anybody got this book? This wonderful coffee table book? Raise your hand. Yeah, wonderful. Everybody's got this. A lot of people got this coffee table book. Scotts Gulf, the Bridgestone, Firestone Centennial Wilderness. And we also, let's see, who is it? Howard Baker, Senator Howard Baker, and John Netherton put this together. It's a beautiful, got lots of beautiful colored pictures in it. If you don't have them, by the way, I'm going to put in a plug. The Friends of Virgin Falls has some of these. We're selling for $25 a piece. You can pick yours up at the Chamber. But it is a wonderful book that outlines what the wishes were when this property was transferred to the state of Tennessee. Let's see, some of the lines that I'd like to quote from in there. Governor Don Sundquist said, "Tennesseans today possess an obligation to protect and preserve our inheritance. In transferring the deed of this rare and unspoiled gem to our state, Chairman Ono has assured its protection and preservation long after we have passed from the scene." Masatoshi Ono, he was the president of Bridgestone at the time. a jewel of a property consisting of thousands of acres of unspoiled wilderness. If you don't know the definition of wilderness, look it up. I think John Muir sums it up better than anybody. But wilderness on the Cumberland Plateau that Firestone had been assembling for many years. Mr. Ono went on to say, "It is our goal that future generations who visit the Bridgestone Firestone Wilderness will find this land as beautiful and unspoiled as is reflected on these pages." One of the most diverse hardwood forests remaining in the world. And this was from John Turner, who was president of the Conservation Fund at the time this property transferred. Now, this is where I may have to get closer to the screen, but if you look at the restrictions, and by the way, you can download the restrictions on savethehardwoods.com. There's some downloads down at the bottom, and you can download the restrictions and read them for yourself. But you will find that it's got statements like no cutting of timber or removal or destruction of trees shall be permitted within the property except when conducted in the following purposes. And it goes on to preserve, protect, and restore vegetative cover that has been damaged, disturbed, or materially threatened by insects, infestation, disease, fire, and other forces of nature. Now, we'll also add that they do differentiate some about the upland parcel, and the upland parcel is defined as 1,000 feet from the canyon rim line, so 1,000 feet away from the rim of the canyon, and for the upland parcel, it goes on to say that, the right to engage in forestry activities, including the cutting, harvesting, and removal of timber, so forth and so on the upland parcel. But let me point out that even with the reservations for the upland parcel, they had a statement in there like, no portion of the property shall be used for a golf course, including but not limited to any tee, fairway, or green. To me, that says they weren't looking for somebody to come in and clear off the entire top of the property. And there are a lot of statements in there, and I highly recommend everybody go down or go to savethehardwoods.com and download those restrictions for yourself. Now, before we got this property and that wonderful book was produced, actually Bridgestone had the property for sale. Unfortunately, the photographs that I have access to that shows part of the Scotts Gulf Foundation, you see the backs of Ross and Brenda Cardwell there. If y'all know Ross and Brenda, every time you see them, thank them. I can assure you, if it were not for them cracking the whip, we wouldn't have any of this anyway. They got a lot of people motivated to get this property preserved. And some of the other people, that's a sample of what almost 6,000 signatures from across the state of people that wanted to see the area preserved in the state that it is today. And I respect, I'm not against the quail by all means, but I've read some handsome numbers in this article that TWRA put in the paper last week in both the Expositor and the Herald Citizen about all the land that you manage. And I wonder how much of that land is like, unreclaimed strip mines and that kind of thing, pine thickets, thousands and thousands of acres of non-indigenous pine that could possibly actually be restored rather than destroyed to make quail habitat. Let's see, when the Scotts Gulf Foundation went on, by the way, we had over $5 million towards the purchase. Bobby Cunningham, the largest private landowner in the state of Tennessee, came to me. I was the treasurer for the Scotts Gulf Foundation. And he said, Marvin, I can put $5 million of my own money into preserving that land. So here you even had somebody that was a timber person recognized that there were some places that you just shouldn't be cutting the trees. Now, we never had to exercise that. I think when it was all said and done, we had $60,000 left over, and we put that money, when we closed down the foundation, into the purchase of the Clark Tract, which now Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency enjoys down in the Big Bottom area. But here you can see United States Senator Bill Frist at the introduction that the land was going to be given. You can see Masatoshi Owner standing there with Governor Sundquist where they were signing all the paperwork. Now we're talking about maps, and they brought up this map and how long it existed, And somebody, this is like fast forward 20 years after the Scotts Gulf Foundation, or 20 plus years after the Scotts Gulf Foundation had formed, and the property had been turned over. Somebody sent me this picture of this map and told me that it was a Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency produced map, and that they planned on basically clear cutting. And I know every time we use that word, oh, no, it's not a clear cut, it's going to be a savanna or that kind of thing. But when you get down to 2 trees per acre, which I've seen an email from Chris Richardson, the deputy director. Is Chris here tonight? Is Chris here tonight? No. Okay. But from Chris Richardson, that says they're going to leave 2 trees per acre up there. Well, you know, I looked and I started putting stuff out on Facebook, like all you people that enjoy hiking to the trails or hiking to the waterfalls over on the east side, like down to Jenny's Branch, Polly's Branch, Punchin Camp, and so forth and so on. All those trails will be destroyed when they do all this logging up there. And, you know, lo and behold, I kept trying to find out if this map was authentic, because I had received it from a source whom I love and trust, but I wanted to make sure that we were working with the right material. And I kept asking Mr. Richardson for the plan, including a map. So finally, I got sent this map. Now, the dates that this map was created and the last modified is over on the right-hand side, and the date that I received it is just underneath that. I cannot read those from there, but we're talking like less than a month later, I got this map, and I got this map as a result. I asked permission from the person who sent me the map, the original map, to send it to Chris, because I still hadn't received a plan or a map from Chris. And I said, well, just tell me, Chris, is this at least 90% accurate? And that's when I got this updated map. Well, now, if you look on this updated map, one of the objections that have been posted on Facebook, they've actually put the trails back in there, and they added a line to their page-and-a-half of plan for clearing 2,000 acres of land that said the trails will be maintained through the savanna. So that was like the end of August right there when I received this map. Well, then I got a call from a state senator that said that, well, you do realize you're using an old map, don't you, that it's no longer 2,000 acres, they're talking about 1,000 acres. And I got the same information emailed to me from a state representative far out of this area that basically said the same thing, that it was nowhere near 2,000 acres. And they forwarded me this map. Now, if you look at the dates and the times over there on the right-hand side, and that's the stuff that when you look at file properties, there's also a bunch of stuff buried, what's called metadata, inside these computer files, so we could probably go out and find a lot more information down in the metadata. But I think these times are just fine. You can see a month later, I get this map, and sure enough, they're showing the 1,000-foot buffer from the rim line. They're no longer going down into the canyon, but oh, you know, from here, I can't see that any trails are in there. Maybe we need to put it back out on Facebook that the trails are gone again. But so they have backed off supposedly to 1,000 acres. When I say supposedly, if the map has changed this many times in 3 months, how much time will it take for it to change back in the other direction if we all just go, oh, okay, we want to see the quail? Let's see. And some of the news articles that have come out. A public meeting at 6 p.m. This was put in the Herald Citizen and the Sparta Expositor on their web pages on Friday, and someone called my attention to it, thank goodness. And they talk about how now we're talking about they're down to 30 acres down there at the bottom. Well, for people that only read headlines, which is probably 70% of the people, and then a few percent will read a headline in the first paragraph, a lot of people would say, for instance, well, I'm not going to a meeting if it's only 230 acres out of all of that land they have over there. But if you went to the second paragraph, they did say that this is going to be the first cut out of 1,000 acres. And I've got one email from someone at TWRA that says it'll take probably 10 years to cut through that 1,000 acres. Well, if you've got 1,000 acres of 100-plus-year-old trees, does it really matter if you cut them all in a day or a week or a year or 10 years? Because at the end of 10 years, you're basically going to have essentially a clear cut on 1,000 acres of trees. Let's see. That same article says TWRA is restoring one of the most endangered habitats in the U.S. by restoring native grasslands. You know, I've come to the conclusion that in the last month and a half, I promise you, I have read more than any single semester when I was in college trying to read on the science. And I've come to the conclusion that science is sort of like opinions. Everybody has their opinion on whatever scientific article, but they're saying restoring here rather than, but we have to destroy a bunch of trees to restore this back to grassland. And then they did ask themselves a question that I'd ask many reporters to ask TWRA, and that is, do you get to keep the money from the sale of the trees? And they were kind. They put this in, are we managing our forests for profit? You can go out and read.
Harvin, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm gonna keep my promise that I told them 10 minutes for you and 10 minutes for Mike, and then people have the opportunity to ask questions. So I'm just trying to do what I said I would do, and I know there's a lot of other questions. Well, TWRA said they would needed to leave here by 8 o'clock.
Hey, I've got my projector and a sound system in the car. Would y'all like to stay and I'll set it up?
Well, I'm just trying to be fair what we said we would do, okay? We want to have... Now, hold on now. Hold on. Listen, we're going to try to do this in an orderly way, okay? We have give TWRA their time.
30 minutes.
How much?
30 minutes you got, right?
30 minutes. They started at 10 after 6, and they stayed for how long? Till 10 till 7, or 5 till 7.
45 minutes.
Okay. All right. It's time for the people to ask. It's time for the people to ask questions. Okay. We've been fair. Okay. And that's what we're here tonight, to be fair in an orderly way.
Well, now I'm going to feel guilty if Mike O'Neill does not get to say a few words.
Mike O'Neill, it's your time. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
First of all, let me say thank you to everyone for the opportunity and the TWRA here. My first statement is going to be, let me say this. We do not oppose your quail habitat. We do, however, oppose the TWRA cutting 75 to 100-year-old hardwood forest to create a quail habitat experiment that may or may not fail. Failure means no one in this room right here, with the exception of the little man that held the flag, will ever see that type of growth of hardwoods on this property ever again in your lifetime. Adding to that, the TWRA has 3,000 plus acres with room to expand over on the Mooneyham side. It's my understanding that TDEX owns some property over there as well. This is the pine that have been planted that can be taken out and turned into the savanna or clear cut, however you guys want to call it. When you get down to 2 trees, you're clear cutting it, guys. I don't care what you say. But I've done a little research, and I went back 50 years. Is when I found the greatest population of quail in the state of Tennessee. A couple of you guys, very educated speakers, obviously went back to 40 years. Well, 40 years, I'm 54-year-old, guys. 40 years ago, we didn't have savannas, we didn't have buffalo, and we didn't have warm season grasses. What we did have was farmers that let their green grass grow. They had pasture lands. Their field or fence rows was grown up into areas that could save, were habitat for the quail. The property that you propose to cut, and I don't see him here, he may be here, Mr. Deck, who is actually in charge of this WMA at present while the other gentleman gets his training in, was there opening morning of bow season. There are hundreds of people that come here to hunt on this particular piece of property because it is open with the statewide hunt for the most part. These people can't afford $500,000 a year to be on a private land lease. We're not asking you to take away your quail project. We're asking you to take it to a better location that's more suited in pines. If this project fails, 20 to 25 years, you can start harvesting pine trees again, folks. And I want the rest of these people to have the opportunity to speak, so I'm going to cut mine short. But I do want to say that the TWRA, I didn't know we were into bird watching, guys. I thought we were into fish and game and other things, not bird watching. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I hope that's trying to be fair, because I know there's a lot of people here, and we appreciate you being here very much. We want the opportunity for you, as folks here tonight that's come from Nashville, Knoxville, Chattanooga, or wherever you've come, we want to give you a little time to be able to ask some questions, okay? So, who is going to be the first one to ask the question? Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I just wanted to go through, if you would all, there's so many of us, and we really do appreciate how much time you've spent with us in learning and listening, and thank you for your patience. I just wanted to share, if you'd be respectful. I know you have a lot of emotion over it. We hear that. But if we could be respectful, one at a time, if you raise your hand, I'll call on you and come up. Oh, we did a sign-in for speakers, and we want to stick to that. Just in light of time, 3 minutes, we'll have a clock up. That 3 minutes, just recognize that there's a person behind you, and we want to take that person and provide them the same amount of time.
Can I, since this is a local issue, could we ask that the local people ask questions first, please? Okay, all right.
And really quickly, I would like to call on Mike Butler is the conservation easement holder and has information he would also like to share.
Whatever will be fine to me. Someone asked me if we asked the local people to first, but hey, I'm open to the people of the state of Tennessee. It's the people's property, okay?
That's true.
Mimi, can you hear me all right, or is this going to work? Is that better? All right, so briefly, I'm here tonight because our organization is the easement holder for the Bridgestone, Firestone, Centennial Wilderness, and it's our duty to vet these projects and make sure they comply with the letter of the easement, and that is what we intend to do. We have been in consultation with TWRA to that effect, and we will meet that obligation with all due haste. As speaking broadly as a conservation organization, for 75 years we've supported scientific-based wildlife management, habitat management, and regardless of the outcome of this proposed project, the fact is that these savanna habitat types are endangered. And we appreciate the public discourse back and forth on this and value that and find that important. And we look forward to seeing what the outcome is.
Thank you. So with that, I'll start with Mickey Griffin, if you would come up. And I apologize if I read your name. Some of these are a little bit harder for me. We do ask that you watch language. I don't think I have to share that, but we do ask that you do, and we do ask that you stick with 3 minutes just to be respectful of the folks that follow you. Thank you.
Yes, my name's Mickey Griffin. I'm chapter president of Plateau Longbeards chapter in Cumberland County of the National Wild Turkey Federation, which we've had a chapter for 24 years. We're a sister county here, so I've hunted Bridgestone, Firestone all my life for over 30 years. I actually killed my first turkey there 30 years ago. I understand from outreach projects and stuff that we do throughout the state with our chapters and stuff, and I understand everything that's going on here. But they are a time and a place for that, especially a place. This is not the place on top. You have extra land, you have other land that can be taken care of for the quail. I'm not against quail hunters at all. I'm for any hunter that does any kind of hunting. So, but up here on this beautiful area that we've hunted for years, I've hunted, killed a lot of deer up there. I've took children on hunts up there, and seriously, I'd hate to see it go. I'd hate to see it go because, you know, I have a few contacts, I'm not going to name, through the TWRA, that says this can grow up to 3,000 acres, which would wipe out the whole top of this area up here by the farm, which is ridiculous. I mean, I hunt Catoosa Wildlife Management Area. I know what a savanna is because I've been seeing it took care of and destroyed for the last few years. I understand the habitat it has, but you cannot cut hundreds of acres and take away from the people that use that and hunt that, because all those hundreds of acres that's joined there, you'll never deer hunt again. You'll never turkey hunt again because you can't hunt. You have to go out the farthest edges to hunt, and it's destroying that area up there. It's all right to do it, but not in such a wide range of area. So I understand this was given for a wildlife and wilderness area. It should be kept that. They do have the other areas in the bottomland and stuff that the gentleman said a while ago would be great to put small areas of quail habitat and bring back things like songbirds and stuff like that for that habitat. So, that's, to wrap up my part is, as an avid hunter and as an avid turkey hunter and a conservationist through the NWTF, I understand that project, but do not wipe this area out up here. It's the kids will never see again what we see up here. So thank you.
Thank you. There's one other thing that I mentioned. If you do have a comment, great, thank you for coming up. If you have a question, we just ask, state your question if you'd sit down so we could quickly move through an answer, try and provide the information for you, and then call on the next person. I appreciate that. So with that, if Mr. Greg Giles would come up. Thank you.
I just have one very quick question for TWRA. It's obvious that there are thousands of acres of non-indigenous pine within a couple of miles of this area proposed that could be cut to provide the quail habitat they're so eager to get. And my question is, why not use those? Why not leave the hardwoods alone? Thank you. That's my question.
And I failed to mention, we have a group of folks willing to answer questions tonight, and they're down at the end of the room, and I thank them for being here. So with that, gentlemen.
Can we turn the lights on?
Yeah, I can try to answer that a little bit. We do have two areas on Bridgestone, Firestone, that's separated by the Caney Fork River drainage, as y'all know. And we are wanting to do work on both places. A lot of the bird species that we're managing for, no way will they be able to travel that distance on their own so you almost have to manage those as two separate areas for the grassland, shrubland bird species. So that's one reason we're trying to do it on both places. And as I mentioned in my presentation, we already have birds there. We can build on the existing habitat that's been there for a lot of years. So, we just want to make what's there and build on it.
Then Mr. Arthur Shipley.
How you guys tonight? I'm Arthur Shipley. I'm retired military, and I've been quail hunting and fooling with quail since Christ was a corporal. But in 1957, these are only suggestions I'm offering to TWRA and TVA. We did the quail restoration program in Kentucky, believe it or not. And we had a lumber come in, he cut up 3,000 acres of timber, and they paid us kids 10 cents a tree to go back and replant what they cut down. Before those trees grew up, like they explained earlier, the quail population took off like you ain't never seen in your life. Everywhere you stepped on that 1,000 acres up there, you stepped on a quail. And as years went by, the trees come back and everything, they grew up. And my suggestion is to TWRA and TVA, this land that TVA owns or controls that's under the flood level, use some of that land for restoration of quail population and all wildlife population. The land is just sitting there, and you go up and down the river and you look at it, there's thousands of acres, there's nothing been done with it. It could be seeded, folks. It could be reestablished for wildlife, and I don't understand that. But anyway, I just thought I'd throw that up. And one more question. Anyone in biologists in TWRA know what coccidiosis is? I was afraid of that. I'm from Black Kettle, Oklahoma, the grasslands. I retired out there at Fort Sill, and I've got a lifetime at Black Kettle. Oh, by the way, if any of you quail hunters go out there, take 3 pair of boots with you, because you're going to wear them out. And I'm going to tell you that round. There's 33,000 acres out there, and nothing but plums and gotcha plants. But anyway, coccidiosis is a disease that's carried by geese. They feed in the same area. It not only kills the quail, it kills dove, red birds. I've seen turkey dead. We've had turkey dead that had contacted this disease, and you need to look at it. And everywhere you see a resident geese or goose, whatever you want to call him, out in the field, if there's any other birds around there, they're going to contact this disease and it's going to kill them. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Gerald Higgins, thank you all for being so respectful. I appreciate that.
Frankly, I don't know where to begin. I moved down here from New York State about 13 years ago. Since I moved down here, the wildlife management area has gone downhill. The harvest statistics from TWRA are abysmal. The turkey harvest last year was 12 turkey for 12,000 acres. Now, anybody that hunts turkey wants to go follow a longbeard. 1,000 acres, nearly 2 square miles. You could barely hear one for 2 square miles. Never mind track one for 2 square miles and sit and hope he's still there when you get there. Like the other gentleman said, I believe it was Mr. O'Neill, there's plenty of ground there to bring quail in. They show these beautiful pictures of the savanna lands. Well, they cut all the pine, lulla pine out there last year. I don't see that grass coming up like this. I don't see the new flowers and plants coming up. Little bitty grass like this that they must have just sown in. If they want native grass there, why don't they sow it? Why are they going to wait for it? It makes no sense to destroy perfectly good habitat. They talk about the food for the deer. The deer need carbohydrates to get through the winter. That comes from oak trees. Oak trees that they called useless in their October 1 article. To mature, an oak tree takes 20 to 50 years to produce fruit. You cut them trees, most of them trees were logged 80 to 100 years ago. They're now in the prime of their years for producing acorns. If the deer don't have the acorns, they're not going to live the winter. They can eat all the darn leaves and everything else they want out of them little branches and grasses, but if they don't have the acorns, they ain't going to make it through the winter, period. I know deer prefer an acorn over corn. There's plenty of people I know put corn out for the deer. A deer would rather eat acorns than corn. That's how much they need it. I could say a whole lot more, but I don't want to insult the TWRA because they spend their time here, and I appreciate that. Thank you all.
Ms. Teresa Lawson?
First of all, I want to thank the TWRA for being here. It takes a lot of time and effort and for you to be here tonight. and to hear us. And I want to thank everybody here who obviously cares a great deal, or they wouldn't have spent the time that they are spending here tonight. I want to make sure you understand this is not just a local problem. I live in Nashville, but I was raised in Sparta. I was born in Sparta, and I grew up on that mountain, and it has my heart, and I love it. I love this area. I love to hike there. But to give you a magnitude, I've run into thousands of people in Nashville who know what Virgin Falls is and who knows what this Bridgestone management area is. I am shocked all the time at people who are like, yeah, I went there last weekend. Yeah, I'm going again. They go and they love this place. In thinking about this, I'm not up on the science. I'm not here to tell you about what I read last week. I'm here to tell you that if I could have a little bit of a voice for all the people who are here tonight and all the people who couldn't be here tonight, who care so much about this area, who cared, and our grandparents and our forefathers cared about it, to bequeath it and to say and put all the time and the effort into saving this land to start with, when they worked with Bridgestone to save this area. If I could say anything, and represent them and have one small voice to help you maybe think about what you're doing and change your mind, then my time and effort tonight was well worth it. Most of the time when I think about, if you see on the news things like this, meetings like this where people are very much concerned about an issue and they bring it to a meeting such as this, it seems like what often we see in the news happens is that really the state or whatever agency says, well, thank you for that opinion, but we're going to do what we're going to do. And I hope you have the courage to not do that. I hope you have the courage to stand up and say, you know what, we might have made the wrong decision, or we could compromise and do this a different way and pick a different spot of land. I appreciate the time that you spent trying to educate us tonight, but just as a citizen, to be honest, it came off as you trying to tell me how my opinion wasn't right, and that the science and your version of science was correct, and how to win me over in getting on your side. My question for you guys ongoing is, where do we go from here? There's a lot of people here interested in what happens beyond tonight. And so how can the people who are interested here in what you are going forward with stay up to date and stay informed of what you really are going to do?
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I'll try to answer that again. We're still in the planning stages of this whole thing. I tried to make that clear in the presentation, so we still have more planning to do. We're continuing our discussions with the conservation easement holder. So, nothing is set in stone at this point. So I think that moving forward, we can maybe put out some news releases, things of that nature, to keep the public informed. I think we can. I'm looking at other people. I'm not the one to make that final decision, but I think we could as an agency. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator Heidi Campbell.
Senator Bailey and Representative Sherrill, thanks so much for hosting this. And thank you for being here. So I just wanted to say I represent a lot of people in Nashville who are also upset about this, and am hearing from people across the state who are upset because they love this land for various reasons, hunting, hiking. And, we lose 10,000 to 100,000 species every year on this planet. So this is your value system, and I appreciate that you love quail and that the quail habitat's very important. I'm not sure that necessarily everybody puts quail habitat above, biodiverse woods. I have a couple questions. One is, TWF is supposed to be managing this from the beginning with Bridgestone's property. And so I don't understand why TWF is not already, since the southern part of this has already been turned into quail habitat, right? So I don't understand why TWF hasn't already been involved with monitoring this. And then my second question would be, do you feel that this actually is consistent with Bridgestone's original intent when they gave us this land?
Thank you, Senator Campbell. I'll address that. First, the properties south are not part of the conservation easement. And to be clear, we do not manage the property. We are the holder of the easement. It's our duty to make sure that any projects that are proposed within the easement boundary adhere to the letter of the easement. And so that's a fairly straightforward, clear-cut legal analysis that our team is doing right now. And so it's based on rights that are established in the easement, and we're doing that analysis right now. And when we wrap that up, we'll make that available to TWRA.
All right, and I apologize for this. So Mr. or Mrs. Brock, and it might be Brenda Brock. I apologize. I can't read that first name. Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Brenda Brock, and I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad you're all here, because we do have a little problem, and it can be fixed out okay. But whenever you start clear cutting, how many little animals are you killing with scooters, cutters? Have you ever watched anybody clear cut? It's horrible. It's ugly, and it don't come up in 6-7 months. After you clear up, it takes about a year or 2 years before you start getting grass. Okay, you got deer. You got the hogs. What are they going to feed on? And the quail, well, we're going to put quail there. The quail died out before we ever had hogs, snakes, or anything, because they always said whenever I was young, there was a disease come through. Well, I tell you what, this spring I got the glorious sound. I had a Bob White, and every morning at 9 o'clock, it would sing its little song. Well, he left, but we do not need to destroy our hardwoods. You got 800 and some acres over there that you can start a habitat for quail. Even grouse. Nobody's never seen anything about grouse, and that is one of the prettiest birds they are. But you just stop and consider, how many things do you kill by clear cutting? After you're clear cutting, how many things do you kill because they're starving to death? So I hope everything comes down and we work everything out. But whenever you clear cut, it's ugly. There's nothing pretty, no more pretty. It's gone. And with the trust of God, He'll work it out. And thank you.
Mr. Greg O'Neill.
I'd like to thank y'all seriously for being here tonight. And yes, I'm the brother of Mike O'Neill. He's the deer hunter of the family. I was the redneck. That being said, I want to ask or make a statement. I appreciate all the studies and the scientists over my head, way over. But I can tell you, growing up there for 50 years, that's been my home. And I can also tell you this. We've talked about deer. We've talked about quail. Let's get back to the redneck. I coon hunt and squirrel hunt. Where's that lane going? Where's those squirrels going to be living? Where's the coons? Yes, it's a dying sport. You want to manage wildlife? Manage and cultivate young men to work with dogs instead of these video games. Keep our land, keep it as it is. To you, it's a project. To us, it's a lifestyle. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for watching your time, everyone. I also appreciate that. Mr. Mark Turner, please.
As someone who primarily hunts on public land within the state of Tennessee, I'm a very passionate deer and turkey hunter, and I just want to thank y'all for coming forward with this proposal. I'm sick and tired of going to WMAs and just seeing closed canopy hardwood forests with nothing to eat on the ground. I've killed a lot of deer in clear cuts, and I've killed a lot of turkey in clear cuts. I've killed a lot of turkey and deer in woodlands and savannas. I just want something cleared up. Number one, are y'all turning this into a golf course? Number two, are you ever going to close this area off from hunting as has been previously suggested by some? Thank you.
No, that, we are not going to close it off to hunting, and nor are we going to manage it as a golf course, so.
Mr. Joe Quayle? I apologize if I...
I would like to say that thank you, first of all, for being here. It's important to get the public's opinion about these things and for TWRA to listen to our opinions as well. So I want to thank you for that, and I think this is a unique opportunity to get a diverse ecosystem within the Bridgestone, Firestone area that isn't really common within the area. So I would like to think that's a unique opportunity for us to do that and get something different within the area that is both good for quail and a lot of different other species that aren't necessarily hunted, but people like to enjoy in general. So thank you very much.
Mr. Rocky, come on up.
Hello, everybody. My name's Rocky Talent. I've been hunting Bridgestone, Firestone for the past 20 years. I'm a disabled veteran. I can't get down in them hollers. I have a statement to make first and then a question. You can answer it. 2 years ago, they cut them pines over across the street from Virgin Falls. They did not tear them roots and them stumps up out of the ground and push them up and burn them so that you create this land that you're talking about. They left trees fell all over the place. Are they going to push those up and burn them? Are they going to push up the hardwoods after they cut them down? Or they go leave stumps sitting this tall where a man cannot get in there to hunt deer or quail? That's all I got to say. Thank you.
So, thank you for that comment. And to address where the pines were cut, or any place you do timber harvest operations, there's a period of time it takes for one to be able to install or implement a prescribed burn. The fine fuels at ground level have to accumulate before that area will carry a fire. So, yes, I know it's been 2 years after those pines are cut, but it takes about that long or longer to get a fire to carry through that stand. Now, it takes a lot of money to de-stump an area. That would be the probably preferred method, I guess, and we've seen some nice results on other WMAs where you did de-stump the area. It just comes down to a lot of money and able to do that. As far as the slash goes and that you ask about, there is some benefit and nutrient cycling to leaving the slash on the ground scattered. If we able to implement this forest cut that we were wanting to propose, slash would be piled minimally and not around the residual trees to damage those when we did implement prescribed fire. So over time, as prescribed fire is used, that logging debris and slash and even the stumps, especially in pine lands, disappears through the process of burning and through the process of just deterioration.
Thank you. Mr. Jake Bones?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank TWRA for coming out and addressing some of the concerns that we had, primarily me as a hunter, how this harvest will affect hunter access and opportunities, as the last gentleman brought up. But thank you for answering those questions.
Ms. Jenny Ivy, please.
Oh. You have a question?
Sorry, did I miss a question? I apologize. Did I miss a question? You didn't have a question. He didn't have a question. There was no question. Okay. Sorry, ma'am. Sorry.
I too want to thank the TWRA and our professors. I learned so much that I did not know about grasslands and savannas, and I just appreciate the education I received tonight. I'm not a hunter. I am a bird watcher, and I am a tree hugger. And I just feel like this is a big, beautiful state, a big, long, beautiful state. And I don't know why we can't find a way to leave our old growth hardwoods and still find places to make savannas and grasslands. I just can't believe that that's not possible. I know it sounds trite, and you can say we're a polarized nation and we're a polarized state and all that business, but I think we're all on the same team. I really do. I really think we can all win in this if we'll just use our brains. And I've seen a lot of brains here tonight, so I don't have a question. I just say let's try to make it work, okay?
Mr. Greg McDaniel?
Hi, everyone. I'm Greg McDaniel. I'm from East Tennessee, chapter president of Quail Forever of 3139 out of East Tennessee. I'm born and raised here in East Tennessee. I'm not from Middle Tennessee. But we, as Quail Forever people, we fully back TWRA in this quail restoration program, wherever it's going to be at in the state of Tennessee. But guys, over the last 50 years, our bird population has left. I mean, we do not have no quail in the state of Tennessee. Several of us travel all over the United States to hunt birds. We spend all of our winters out west hunting birds. I know we're never going to make them come back like Kansas or Oklahoma, but we've got to try this time to do something, whether it's here or somewhere else. But TWRA is backing us, we're backing them, but we need to do something in the state of Tennessee for the quail right now. If it's not done right now, we're going to lose them. Thank you.
Mr. Robert Grang?
My name is Robert Grieving. I'm a lifetime member of Quail Forever, lifetime member of Pheasants Forever. I'm a member, not really lifetime yet, but I probably will be, of National Wild Turkey Federation, National Deer Association, Rocky Mountain Elk Federation. I am not a botanist. I'm not a biologist. I am a conservationist. And if years ago we didn't take some steps to restore the wild turkey in the United States, we wouldn't have the population we've got now. If we didn't take steps years ago, and my relatives are from up in Minnesota, my in-laws are from up in Minnesota, and they used to go for miles just to see a deer track. If we didn't do things to conserve those species, we wouldn't have these hunting opportunities that we talk about here. I remember when I was a kid, I used to go with my uncle, and we used to go quail hunting. We'd rabbit hunt, and occasionally we'd wind up on a covey of quail. We had beagles, and so all they were was flushing dogs. They weren't really pointing dogs. But we used to run into several covey of quail on a periodic basis almost every time we went out rabbit hunting. We don't do that anymore. You can't find a darn quail unless you go to a preserve and you pay $400 a day to hunt up a couple of coveys of quail. We need to do something. I don't know anything about the highlands or the lowlands of the WMA we're talking about. Bridgestone, Firestone is not familiar to me. I don't hunt it. I wish I did now that I've heard about a number of you individuals that actually do. I am an avid hunter. I'm an avid fisherman. But we need to do something. And hopefully the TWRA, with the science, with the botanists, with the biologists, with the timber specialists and everything else, they can sort this out. But I really think that we need to do something. We can't all sit here and say, well, let's have that done someplace else. If we did that, we wouldn't have any elk in Tennessee. We wouldn't have the turkeys back in Tennessee. We just need to do something. And hopefully we can all come together and do something positive and conserve not only the diversity of our wildlife, but also the diversity of our forests. Thank you.
And I will definitely apologize for this one because I cannot read the first name, but a Ms. McDonald. Elizabeth, thank you, ma'am. Again, thank you all for being so respectful, and thank you for sharing your opinions and questions.
I want to thank everybody that has put on a presentation here. It has been very interesting to hear and see your slides. I'm not a hunter. I'm from White County. I live here in White County. Bridgestone Firestone is one of the gems in White County. We love Bridgestone Firestone. I'm going to get upset just talking about it. My children come from all over the world to come visit so they can go to the Gulf. And we get in the kayaks, and we come down the kayaks, and it's beautiful to go through there. It's like no other place in the whole world. It's, I had a friend who used to call it Shangri-La, and I believe it. If you haven't been up there, you need to go. It is beautiful up there. It's a place that is so beautiful and so intact that they're even considering doing a movie about Davy Crockett. I don't know if you know Ruby Gadara, but she does sets for these movie theaters. She did that Nashville set. They're up there looking at Bridgestone Firestone. They're looking at the Gulf because it looks just like it was in their mind, in the producer's mind, to what it was when Davy Crockett was here. This can never be replaced. I appreciate the concerns about quail, but you got people in this room who for generations, they've taught their children. They've taught their children how to take care of the land, how to love the land, how to hunt. Good hunters. Those men and women teach their children how to do it safely, and they're good hunters too. This is our home. We're welcoming to anybody that wants to come to our home. But y'all need to understand, you're attacking our home when you clear cut and when you talk about the balls. That doesn't look like White County. It doesn't look like any White County that any generation here that's here right now has ever seen. And I'm asking you, please, to consider not only the quail and not only the species, which was a wonderful presentation. I very much appreciate it. But consider us. Consider the Tennesseans who come here, the people who come here to Tennessee just to see places like Bridgestone, Firestone. That's Tennessee. People come here to see Tennessee, and we have it right here in White County. I'd also like to ask you, on this map that you're talking about, can you point out in the map where Welch's Point is and what will be seen from Welch's Point when you finish. We're already going down to the falls, and it's horrible looking. It's sad. It's a sad, what used to be such a beautiful, beautiful place. It's just sad. Is my 3 minutes up or something? Well, that's my question.
They're rarely familiar. I think one of them will be able to answer.
I just want a map with where it's going to be and all the places we love. That's all.
Yeah. We can point that out on that map, but as I've said before, any habitat management or cutting we want to do will be in the upland parcel, nowhere near the Gulf or nowhere near Welch's Point.
Mr. Jeremy French, please. Thank you.
How's everyone doing tonight? So, my name's Jeremy French. I am a wildlife biologist. I'm a conservationist. I'm a hunter. I like to consider myself a botanist as well. And I've got a question for the panel, but first I want to say something. I went to school out west, and I love Tennessee now. And one of the rare things that I see in Tennessee are grasslands. And I will tell you that I come to Bridgestone Firestone WMA just because of the biodiversity there. I had the ability this year to go to those burn units and not only tour them, but go on my own and see thousands and thousands of orange-fringed orchids, a plant that I've never seen in Tennessee anywhere else. I've dedicated my life to conservation and hunting, so much so that I sit on the board of a lot of nonprofits geared towards protecting hunting, trapping, coon hunting, bear hunting, whatever it is. I will fight for you. But I support this management plan. We've got to do something different than we've been historically doing and letting these hardwoods just grow and grow and grow to create not ideal habitat and not historic habitat. So I've heard a lot of questions about why here, why not somewhere else. So I was wondering if the board could talk to me a little bit about the current quail population at Bridgestone Firestone WMA, and then also talk to me a little bit about the current biodiversity that we see in those burn units and what we can expect going forward, as opposed to a hardwood forest. Thank you.
On the farm unit at Bridgestone, currently there's 6 coveys of birds. Through all of the monitoring that has been done, that's what the estimates show, that on that approximately 600 acres, there's 6 coveys of birds. That's not optimal. Optimal would be somewhere in the neighborhood of a covey per 40 to 50 acres. On the burn units that you're referring to, that's the prescribed fire demonstration area, which is on the east side of the farm unit. And there we have identified at least 175 plant species, whereas on the inside, on the interior of the farm unit, it would be fewer than that, where most of the agriculture is taking place and where many of the areas still have a tall fescue base that has inhibited the seed bank from germinating. But Dwayne might want to mention the species diversity of the other areas.
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the things that we're finding is that when you look at the restored savannas at Bridgestone, Firestone, it's unparalleled biodiversity, where in that area, especially where Dr. Harper and his graduate students have been working with TWRA over the past several years to restore, we're probably talking about in excess of 200 to 300 species of plants in there. Many of those species cannot grow outside that habitat. They have to grow in those conditions. They're habitat specialists, just like bobwhite quail is somewhat of a habitat specialist as well, and several bird species. So the last thing I'll say is that when we go into those hardwood forests, the dry upland hardwood forest, what we see there are the signatures of the plants that are able to persist in the leaf litter. They are the species that are barely hanging on, and they oftentimes won't flower, they won't set fruit. Shrubs like chinkapins, for example, which used to fruit prolifically decades and decades ago, more than a half century ago, today they sit in the understory without the ability to set fruit, at least heavily. And many of those species that are there, they have to have light. They're like quail. They have to have light. They have to have certain kinds of conditions. So when we go in there and read the clues of the land, the signatures are there that the species that need our help the most need open conditions, not closed canopy conditions.
Mr. Scott Banbury, I apologize again.
Oh, you totally slaughtered it.
Did I?
Scott Banbury, I am super excited that this meeting is even happening, because I think a lot of times decisions get made about our public lands that we don't have anything to say about. And here everybody's exchanging their ideas, and I am not going to go against any of my biologist or ecologist friends that have talked about how important it is that we actually recover habitat for species that don't have it in the state of Tennessee. But I would ask whether we couldn't do something at the state government level to create incentives for a lot of the farmlands that we have that are marginal right now to be restored to provide these kinds of habitat. Or I live down in Warren County, and somebody asked earlier, like, what happens when clear cutting happens? Well, all the raccoons and possums and squirrels are all living in my attic now. Because timber prices went up a little bit this summer, and everybody around me cut everything, and now all the critters are living in my attic, which is, you know, I'm kind of cool with that. So, I mean, what I really hope is what's happening here is that we are all talking openly about what to do with the small amount of land that we own as the people of Tennessee. There's tons of private land in Tennessee, and there's all kinds of ways that we can incentivize recreating the habitats, the ecological conditions that we want to on those private lands that might be marginal right now, but we only own a little bit as the people of Tennessee, and we tend to own the really high, rocky, craggy kind of areas. I mean, I live on the Collins River. It flows out of the Savage Gulf. They couldn't ever log the Savage Gulf, because how could you ever get a team of mules down into Savage Gulf to haul the timber out? And so that's where we have a natural area. And that's kind of, I mean, I've gone and hiked around, you know, Virgin Falls, and it's kind of high and steep, and it's hard to get into. So I hope we're all thinking about how best to use our public lands here. And if we need some quail habitat, my goodness, let's go and reclaim some of those hay fields and pastures that may be better for that. Thanks, Paul.
Mr. Ben Myers.
Thanks, guys, for being here. My name is Ben Myers. I'm a forester, and to tell a story about why I became a forester is my family moved from East Tennessee in the 1790s, and they made their way across eastern Tennessee to Pikeville, and they moved over the hill to McMinnville in 1850. And in that time, it was they rode horses over to McMinnville, and then you had a cattle farm down in the in row crops and so forth in the valley. And so I'm 44, and my grandmother, she passed away, I think in around 1980, and she told me stories about when she first came and married into the family. She came and rode horseback across the plateau. And so the one thing that I would encourage all of you all to, that are against the harvest plan, I think it's a great plan, but I would encourage you all to think about the biodiversity this is going to create, and to look back at the history, in those old land grant notes about what the plateau was, what the Cumberland Plateau was, because it wasn't the closed canopy forest that's here. And so I'd encourage y'all to look at the science, look at the biodiversity that is in the Bridgestone Firestone WMA, and look at those shortleaf pines that are scattered out through there that are 70 and 90 and 120 years old that first started growing when it was a much more open habitat. And I think there's some ways we can mitigate it. And so if you listen to the plan, that the cove forest is being left alone, staying out of there, and then your management's going to be focused on the upland sites, and then there can be a lot of biodiversity that's created within those upland sites. And so I would just encourage all of you have concerns to talk to a forester, take a walk through the woods with a forester, take a walk through the woods with somebody in the TWRA, and see why we get so excited about this plan. Because I'm excited about it. To change some of this, the monoculture of the forest that's there, and to shift it to something that's a lot more diverse. And you may disagree with us after the walk through the woods, but take a walk through the woods with us. Thank you.
I apologize, but there are 5 people on the list. Representative Cheryl shared with us we are at the end of our time. And I firstly want to say, on behalf of Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, we appreciate you. We appreciate how much time you spent with us this evening. We appreciate your ears. And with that, I'll turn it over. Thank you.
Thank you again for each and every one that's been here tonight. From Senator Paul Bailey and myself, we want to say thank you. We want to try to go to Nashville and represent you the best way we can for the people of the great state of Tennessee. I want to say thank you to the city of Sparta for allowing us to have this building tonight, to use it for this meeting, and they didn't charge us for it, so we thank the city of Sparta. We appreciate that very much. We want to say thank you to Ben Lomond Telephone, Ben Lomond TV for being here tonight. We appreciate you being here. Channel 5 out of Nashville has been with us tonight. We appreciate you. Fox 17 has also been here with us tonight. We appreciate them. And we just want to make sure at this time our commissioners, TWRA commissioners, are with us tonight. We don't have them all, but we have them. And August the 19th, they allowed me to go to Cookeville and say a few words concerning this situation. Would the commissioners please stand that's here with us tonight? Thank you. Thank you for making your time to be out here with us tonight. We appreciate it. We know it's took up your time. We know you've come from all over the state of Tennessee. We appreciate that very much. And we want to say thank you also to all of the TWRA people that are here that works for us in the state of Tennessee to try to help us to keep our state in good shape. And we got to have you, as well as we've got to have other departments, because we want to take care of our wildlife. So we do appreciate you. Thank you again for this time. And one other thing, I want to say this. Sheila Butt, please come here. Sheila Butt was in Nashville when I was first elected. You want to talk about a good conservative Republican, this lady right here, I went to her for advice. And I appreciate her very much.
And
Thank
he's a
you.
dear friend.
Come here.
And I just want to say that you have a good man in Paul Sherrill. You certainly do in Paul Bailey, but Paul Sherrill was my dear friend at Nashville. Thank you.
Thank you. And at this time, you're dismissed. If you have any questions, you can contact TWRA on their website. Thank you, everyone.